The cafe was empty when he walked in, and Maya knew the way prey knows a predator has entered the clearing, that her shift had just taken a turn into dangerous territory. The clock above the espresso machine read 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until closing. 13 minutes that suddenly felt like an eternity stretching between her and the locked door. He moved like darkness given form, all sharp angles and fluid grace that didn't belong in her fluorescent-lit coffee shop with its chipped counters and the persistent smell of burnt milk. His suit probably cost more than her rent. His eyes, pale gray, almost silver in the harsh lighting, fixed on her with an intensity that made her hands tremble as she set down the rag she'd been using to wipe tables. "We're about to close," she said, hating how her voice shook. Hating how small she sounded. He smiled, and Maya's breath caught. Fangs. Actual fangs, gleaming white and sharp and utterly impossible. Except they weren't impossible, were they? Not when he stood right there, real as the terror flooding her veins. "I'm aware," he said, his voice like velvet dragged across gravel. "I'm here for you, Maya Chen," her blood turned to ice. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. God, what had she stumbled into? "I don't have any money. The register is almost empty, it's Monday night, we barely." "I don't want your money." He moved to the counter in 3 strides that seemed to eat the distance between them. "I want 5 minutes of your time." "Well, perhaps a bit more than that, but we'll start with 5-inch. Maya's back hit the espresso machine. The metal was warm against her spine, grounding her when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. 5 minutes for what? To make me laugh, she blinked. Of all the things she'd expected a vampire, Christ, vampires were real, to say, that hadn't even made the list. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me." He leaned against the counter, perfectly at ease, as if he hadn't just shattered her entire understanding of reality. "I've been alive for 437 years, Maya. Do you know how tedious that becomes? How crushingly, devastatingly boring immortality is when you've seen everything, done everything, tasted everything." His eyes drifted to her neck, lingering on her pulse point. "Almost everything." Maya's hand flew to her throat instinctively. "You want to drink my blood? Eventually. If you prove entertaining enough." He checked his watch, an antique piece that probably belonged in a museum. "You have 5 minutes starting now to make me laugh. Genuinely laugh. If you succeed, I'll leave you alone. If you fail," he shrugged, the gesture elegant and terrifying. "Well, I'm quite hungry." This is insane, but she was already thinking, her mind racing through every joke she'd ever heard, every funny story, every witty comeback. 5 minutes. She had 5 minutes to save her life by making a vampire laugh. Okay. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Pressure doesn't help. Neither does whining, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement, maybe. God, she hoped it was amusement. Maya took a breath, forcing herself to think past the panic. Comedy. She'd been funny once, hadn't she? Before the divorce, before her mother's diagnosis, before she'd become this exhausted shell working double shifts, just to keep the lights on. Somewhere in there, buried under layers of survival and grief, was the girl who'd made her college roommate snort coffee out her nose with a well-timed observation. "All right," she said, squaring her shoulders. "You want funny? How about this? You've been alive for over 4 centuries, and you chose to terrorize a barista at a place that charges $8 for oat milk. That's either impressively petty, or a serious misuse of your immortal time." His eyebrow arched. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. And it's not about the location. It's about the hunt. The anticipation. Right, because nothing says apex predator like hanging out at Java Junction on a Monday night. The words were out before she could stop them, carried on a wave of hysteria, that was either going to save her or get her killed. What's next? Stalking accountants at H&R Block during tax season. Lurking at the DMV. 3 minutes, 15 seconds, but his lips twitched. Just slightly. Maya felt a spark of hope, dangerous and bright. He was listening. More than that, he was engaged. She grabbed onto that thread like a lifeline. I'm just saying, if I were an all-powerful creature of the night with supernatural speed and strength, I'd aim higher than traumatizing someone who makes minimum wage and smells like vanilla syrup. There's a whole city council meeting every Tuesday. Bankers. Hedge fund managers. People who deserve to be scared. And you don't. His voice was softer now, curious. He tilted his head, studying her the way someone might study an unexpected puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the picture they'd been building. I mean, I microwaved fish in the break room last week, so maybe a little, Maya said. But compared to the guy who comes in every morning and orders a venti iced coffee with 17 modifications and then complains it's wrong. I'm a saint. You should be terrorizing him. 2 minutes, 30 seconds, he pushed off the counter, circling around it with that unnervingly fluid grace. Maya's instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The back door was locked, deadbolted from the outside per company policy. The front door might as well have been miles away. Tell me more about this fish incident. It was salmon. And before you judge me, I was stressed. She tracked his movement, turning to keep him in her line of sight. He was toying with her, she realized. Like a cat with a mouse. The thought should have terrified her more than it did, but something else was happening. She was talking, really talking, and he was listening. When was the last time anyone had actually listened to her? My mom's in hospice. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The insurance company denied her pain medication claim for the third time, and I'd been on hold with them for 90 minutes, and I needed to eat something, okay. I needed 5 minutes, where I wasn't drowning in medical bills and phone trees and the knowledge that I'm going to lose her. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than she'd intended. She'd said too much. Shown too much. This creature didn't care about her dying mother, or her crushing debt, or the fact that she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 4 hours in a row. But he'd stopped moving. 1 minute, 45 seconds. You know what the worst part is? Maya heard herself continue, unable to stop now that she'd started. Everyone keeps telling me to stay positive. To have faith. Like optimism is going to shrink the tumor. Like if I just believe hard enough, my mom won't die screaming in pain because some insurance algorithm decided her suffering isn't cost-effective. She laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. So yeah, I microwaved fish. I'm a monster. Clearly, we're both predators here. I should probably be hunting you. Something shifted in his expression. His eyes, which had been cold and calculating, now held something that might have been recognition. 1 minute, 15 seconds. I don't think I can make you laugh, Maya admitted. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. I'm not funny anymore. I used to be, but that person doesn't exist now. She got buried under hospital visits and GoFundMe campaigns and the very specific humiliation of crying in your car, in a Walgreens parking lot, because you can't afford both your mother's medication and your own rent. She met his eyes, and maybe it was the exhaustion, or the surreality of the situation, but she found she wasn't afraid anymore. Just tired. So if you're going to kill me, just do it. I'm too fucking tired to perform. 45 seconds, he was close now, close enough that she could see the silver threads in his eyes, the way they caught the light. Close enough that she should have been able to feel his breath on her skin, except he didn't breathe. Dead? He was dead, had been dead for centuries, and yet he seemed more alive than she'd felt in months. The irony isn't lost on me, by the way," she said quietly. "You're offering me escape through death, and I'm offering you escape through laughter. We are both looking for the same thing, aren't we? A way out of the grinding numbness of existing without living." 30 seconds, his voice was barely a whisper now. "So here's my final attempt at comedy. A vampire walks into a coffee shop and threatens to kill a barista unless she makes him laugh. She tells him about her dying mother, her crippling debt, and her complete inability to feel joy anymore. He realizes he's not the scariest thing in her life. That's the joke. That's the punchline. Human suffering is so absurd and crushing that even an immortal predator can't compete with it." Silence stretched between them. The clock ticked. 5 seconds. 3. 1. Then he laughed. It started as a low rumble in his chest and built into something genuine, something that transformed his face from marble sculpture into something almost human. He laughed like someone who hadn't done so in a very long time, the sound echoing off the walls of the empty cafe. "Oh, Maya," he said when he finally stopped, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. "That was the most devastatingly unfunny thing I've heard in 200 years. She stared at him, not quite believing what had just happened. "I made you laugh. You made me remember what it feels like to be surprised," he corrected. "Do you know how rare that is?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into her trembling hand. "My name is Lucian Corvus. I own several enterprises in the city, including a rather successful pharmaceutical company. The insurance claim for your mother's medication will be approved by morning. Consider it payment for your entertainment." Maya looked down at the card, then back up at him. "I don't understand." "I wasn't really going to kill you," Lucian said, and there was something in his voice that might have been regret. "I was testing you. The court has been looking for someone with your particular qualities, the ability to face death with honesty rather than false bravado or groveling. The ability to find absurdity in horror." He moved toward the door, then paused. "We'll speak again, Maya Chen. Soon. And next time, I won't be the one issuing challenges." "Wait," she called after him. "What does that mean? What court? What qualities?" But he was already gone, dissolved into shadow and night air, leaving behind only the faint scent of old books and older blood. Maya stood alone in her empty cafe, holding a business card that probably cost more than her car, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd been threatened by a vampire. She'd made him laugh by weaponizing her own misery. And somehow, impossibly, her mother's medication was going to be covered. The clock read midnight. Her shift was over. She should lock up, go home, collapse into bed and pretend this had all been some exhaustion-induced hallucination. But she knew it wasn't. The card in her hand was real. The lingering chill in the air was real. Whatever she'd just stumbled into was very, very real. Maya locked the door, turned off the lights, and walked to her car with Lucian's words echoing in her mind. The court. Testing. Qualities. She didn't know what any of it meant, but as she drove home through empty streets, she realized something had shifted. For the first time in months, she felt curious about tomorrow. Terrified, yes. Confused, absolutely. But also curious. And that was something. That was enough. By the time the sun rose, her mother's medication had been approved with a personal note from the insurance company's CEO apologizing for the administrative error. Maya sat in the hospice room, holding her mother's hand while she slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, and wondered what price she'd just agreed to pay. Because nothing in life was free, she knew that better than anyone. And if vampires were real, if there was a court that tested people in empty cafes at midnight, then there were rules to this new world she'd discovered. Rules she didn't yet understand. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was brief, Tonight. The address on the card. 8 p.m. Wear something you can move in. L. Maya stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the delete button. She could ignore it. Pretend none of this had happened. Go back to her crushing routine of work and worry and slowly drowning in a life that felt more like survival than living. Or she could show up at 8 p.m. and find out what a vampire wanted with a barista who'd made him laugh by being devastatingly honest about her own despair. The choice should have been obvious. Safe versus dangerous. Known versus unknown. Life versus potential death. But as she watched her mother sleep without pain for the first time in months, Maya realized the choice had already been made. Whatever Lucian Corvus wanted, whatever this court demanded, it had to be more interesting than slowly suffocating under the weight of ordinary human suffering. She texted back, "I'll be there." His response came immediately, "Good. You're going to need that wit you found last night. The others won't be as easily impressed." Others. There were others. Of course there were others. Maya put her phone away and squeezed her mother's hand gently, careful not to wake her. "I think I might have done something really stupid," she whispered. "But also maybe really interesting. I'll tell you about it if I survive." Her mother slept on, breathing easily for the first time in weeks, and Maya let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found a way to fight back against the grinding machinery of a world that took and took and took until there was nothing left. The card sat in her pocket, heavy with possibility. Lucian Corvus. Vampire. Pharmaceutical magnate. And apparently, her ticket into a world where the monsters were real, but at least they were honest about what they wanted. At 7:30 that evening, Maya stood in front of her closet trying to figure out what something you can move in meant in vampire terms. Jeans seemed too casual. A dress seemed too formal. She settled on black leggings, a fitted tank top, and a leather jacket she'd bought years ago, when she still thought she might be someone interesting. The address on the card led to a building in the financial district, all glass and steel and the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. The lobby was empty except for a security guard, who nodded at her, as if he'd been expecting her. 23rd floor, he said. They are waiting. The elevator rose so smoothly she barely felt the movement. Maya watched the numbers climb and tried to calm her racing heart. This was insane. She was walking into a building full of vampires, because one of them had found her amusing. She should turn around. Run. But the doors opened before she could make that choice, revealing a hallway lined with art that probably belonged in museums, and lit by chandeliers that caught the light like captured stars. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Maya walked toward it, each step feeling like a decision she couldn't take back. The room beyond was vast, circular, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city sprawling below. And standing in a loose circle around the room's center were 7 figures, all of them beautiful in that same unsettling way Lucian was beautiful, too perfect, too still, too much. Lucian stood nearest the door. He smiled when he saw her. She came. I told you she would. You also told us she was funny, a woman said. She had dark skin and darker eyes, and when she moved it was like watching liquid shadow. So far, I'm not amused. Give her a moment, Serafina, another voice said, this one male and tinged with an accent Maya couldn't place. The night is young. Well, young for us. Maya stepped into the room, very aware that the door had closed behind her. 7 vampires. She was trapped in a room with 7 vampires. The panic that had been lurking at the edges of her consciousness threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down. Panic wouldn't help. Wit might. So this is the court, she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. I was expecting something with more Gothic architecture. Maybe some candles. This looks like a corporate boardroom. We've modernized, Lucian said. Keeps the hunters off our trail. No one suspects predators in penthouse suites. Except now I do, Maya pointed out. So maybe the camouflage needs work. Serafina's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Perhaps she is amusing after all. She moved closer, circling Maya the way Lucian had circled her in the cafe. Tell me, little mortal, do you know why you're here? Because I made Lucian laugh. Because you didn't beg, another vampire said. This one was younger looking than the others, barely out of his teens in appearance, though his eyes held centuries. Most humans, when faced with their own death, either grovel or attack. You did neither. You made it a conversation. I was too tired to grovel, Maya admitted. And attacking a vampire seemed counterproductive. Honesty, the youngest-looking vampire said to the others. See? Lucian was right about this 1 inch. Maya's patience, already worn thin by fear and confusion, finally snapped. Right about what? What do you want from me? Because if this is some elaborate setup to drink my blood, just do it already. I've had a long day and I'm really not in the mood for cryptic vampire politics. The room went silent. Several of the court members exchanged glances. Then Lucian laughed again, that same surprised sound from the cafe. There it is. That beautiful, self-destructive defiance. We want to hire you, Serafina said bluntly. As our mortal liaison. Maya blinked. I'm sorry, what? The court requires a human who can move in mortal circles without suspicion, Lucian explained. Someone who can gather information, make contacts, handle business that requires a daylight presence. Someone who can be trusted because they understand exactly what we are and choose to work with us anyway. And the payment? Maya asked, because she hadn't survived this long by not asking about money. Your mother's full medical care, Lucian said. In a private facility, with the best doctors in the country. Experimental treatments that aren't available to the public. Pain management that actually works. And a salary that will let you quit your 3 jobs and sleep more than 4 hours a night. It was too good to be true. It had to be. What's the catch? You belong to us, Serafina said simply. Your time, your loyalty, your silence. And if you betray us, she smiled, showing fangs. Well. Then Lucian gets to finish what he started in that cafe. Maya should have said no. Should have run. But she thought of her mother, thought of the peace on her face this morning when the pain had finally stopped. Thought of the grinding exhaustion of her own life, the slow death of working herself into nothing for barely enough to survive. If I do this, I want it in writing. Contract. Specific terms. And I want the medical care to start immediately, regardless of how long I work for you. She negotiates, one of the other vampires said, sounding delighted. Oh, I like her. We have a contract prepared, Lucian said, producing a folder from somewhere. Read it carefully. We'll give you 3 days to decide. But Maya. He caught her eyes, held them. This offer expires at midnight on Friday. After that, you go back to your old life, and we never speak again. The medical care will stop. Everything returns to how it was. Unless she tells someone what she's learned tonight, Serafina added. In which case, she doesn't get to go back at all. The threat was clear. Maya took the folder with hands that only shook slightly. I'll have an answer by Friday. Good. Lucian walked her back to the elevator. As the doors began to close, he spoke one last time. For what it's worth, I hope you say yes. The court needs someone like you. Someone who's already looked death in the face and found it less frightening than life. That's a rare quality, Maya Chen. Don't waste it on safety. The elevator descended, and Maya stood alone with a contract that would change everything. She didn't open it until she was home, sitting at her kitchen table with a glass of wine she couldn't afford but desperately needed. The terms were clear, detailed, and exactly as promised. Medical care for her mother. A salary that would change her life. In exchange, she would work for the court, doing whatever tasks they required, keeping their secrets, living half in their world and half in her own. The contract was for 5 years. 5 years of her life given to vampires. 5 years of her mother potentially surviving, thriving even, with medical care most people could only dream of. 5 years of not drowning. Maya signed it at 3 a.m, too exhausted to second-guess herself, and emailed it back to the address Lucian had provided. His response came before she'd even closed her laptop. Welcome to the court. Your first assignment begins Monday. Get some rest. You're going to need it. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But a larger part, the part that had been dying slowly under the weight of ordinary life, felt something she hadn't felt in years: anticipation. Maya climbed into bed as dawn broke over the city, and for the first time in months, she slept dreamlessly, deeply, and when she woke 8 hours later, her mother's hospice was calling to say she'd been approved for transfer to a private facility that afternoon. It was real. All of it was real. Maya had sold her loyalty to vampires, and somehow, impossibly, it felt like the first truly autonomous choice she'd made in years. Not survival. Not necessity. Choice. She had chosen this, chosen the danger and the unknown over the slow grinding death of her previous existence. Monday came faster than she expected. The court's driver picked her up at 7 p.m, they kept vampire hours, apparently, and drove her back to the building with the too beautiful lobby. Lucian met her in a different room this time, smaller, more like an actual office. Your first task is simple, he said. There's a human businessman who's been embezzling from one of our subsidiary companies. We need documentation of his crimes, enough to force him to either return the money or face very public prosecution. You'll befriend his assistant, gain access to his files, and report back to us within 2 weeks. Corporate espionage, Maya said. Not exactly what I expected from vampires. We've been doing this for centuries, Lucian said. Just because we are immortal doesn't mean we are not practical. Money is power, Maya. Even for us, he handed her another folder. Everything you need to know about the target and his assistant. Study it. Memorize it. Become someone she wants to befriend. Maya took the folder and felt the weight of her new reality settling onto her shoulders. This was her life now. Working for creatures who could kill her with a thought, hunting information in the daylight hours when they couldn't move. She was a tool, a weapon, a bridge between two worlds. And somehow, despite everything, it felt right. Like she'd finally found a place where her particular brand of defiant exhaustion was actually useful. I won't let you down, she said. Lucian smiled. I know. That's why we chose you. As Maya left that night, carrying her folder of secrets and her new purpose, she realized something profound had shifted. She'd walked into that cafe expecting another crushing shift of serving coffee to people who barely saw her. Instead, she'd found monsters who saw her clearly, who valued her specifically because she'd stopped pretending the world was anything other than brutal and absurd. 6 months later, Maya stood in her mother's private room watching her laugh at something on television, her color better than it had been in years, the pain managed so well she barely needed medication anymore. The experimental treatment was working. Her mother was going to live. And all it had cost was Maya's soul. Except it didn't feel like she'd lost her soul. It felt like she'd finally found something worth giving it for. The court had secrets, yes, and darkness, absolutely. But they'd also given her power in a world that had spent years grinding her into nothing. They'd seen her worth when no one else had. Maya's phone buzzed. Lucian, assignment complete. Well done. The court is pleased. Come by tonight. We have something more interesting for you. She smiled, texted back a confirmation, and kissed her mother's forehead. I have to go to work, Mom. I'll be back tomorrow. Her mother squeezed her hand, eyes bright and clear. You seem different lately. Happier. I am, Maya said honestly. I found something I'm good at. She left before her mother could ask what that something was, because the truth, I work for vampires now, and it's the best decision I ever made, wouldn't go over well. But it was true. Every word of it. Maya had made a vampire laugh by weaponizing her own despair, and in return, he'd given her a reason to hope. It was absurd. It was dangerous. It was the most alive she'd felt in years. The city lights glittered below as she drove toward the court's building, toward Lucian and whatever interesting challenge he had waiting for her, toward a life that finally, impossibly, felt like it belonged to her. She'd faced death in an empty cafe at midnight and discovered that sometimes the monsters are less terrifying than the grinding machinery of ordinary existence. Sometimes they are the ones who offer you a way out. And sometimes, if you're brave enough and broken enough and honest enough, you take it. Maya parked in the building's garage and rode the elevator up to the 23rd floor, ready for whatever came next, knowing that she'd chosen this, chosen them, chosen life in the darkness over death in the light. The doors opened. Lucian was waiting. Ready? He asked. Always, Maya said, and meant it. This was her life now. And finally, after so long, it felt like living.